you've clearly got a ton of experience out there. We're talking bow hunting gear. We should probably start with bows.
Yes, sir.
Like, what are you shooting?
Right now I'm shooting a Bowtech Realm with 7-inch brace height. And that to me has been an incredible bow. I'm 42 and, played some ball in my day and had some injuries. And I've shot everything across the board. I always say I have no loyalties. I'm always jumping around trying to find the best thing. And that to me, we don't see many 7-inch brace height bows anymore. Matthew's had, a lot of target bows, and there's been a lot of nice target bows out there, but that hybrid, that 7-inch brace height. And I know there's a lot of discussion about, if your form's good, the 6-inch won't matter. And I've got a 27-inch draw, and I shoot a 70-pound bow. And, I chase speed like everybody else when I was younger. I tried to get that I remember when my first bow was like 300 feet per second, and that's all I thought about. And we had the overdraws. And what I found, in that heat of that moment, that I wanted the bow that allowed me, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you practice and how many steps you take, you're still going to have that, mind-numbing experience, those nerves, those rattled nerves. And you're not going to be thinking about those little things, So right now, Bowtech Realm with the 7-inch brace height, and I really love that bow. It's been kind to my shoulder. The draw on that thing is so smooth. And literally, there's sometimes I'll go through 3 or 4 bows a year. And I've really been married to that bow for a couple of years because it's just been so kind to my body. And if you're pain free, it's amazing how much more you enjoy things. And when you're young and you're like, my shoulders, and you see, I shot 80 pounds from 2010 to 14 for no other reason I wanted to try. And looking back now, and thankfully I didn't sustain an injury, but looking back now, I'm like, gosh, I really didn't need to do that. No. But you kind of go through the steps in life, right? Whatever it is, whether it's trophy hunting or, like you said, trying to fill your tags or what have you. And so I kind of came full circle. But if I could convey one thing, it's just that forgiveness you get with those longer brace height bows. It doesn't have to be Bowtech, but it could be anything. But I love that longer brace height on that bow.
Yeah, that's a good bow. 7 inches is a real solid brace height, especially for whitetail hunters. If you're talking a 6-inch brace height, so we should qualify everything and say, this is obviously an individual thing. It's totally subjective, but
absolutely.
If you're a typical whitetail hunter and you're going to be drawn from a tree stand, you're probably not shooting, 20,000 arrows a year. A 7-inch brace height is a solid place to start with a bow. It's going to just generally be more comfortable for you. It's going to be more forgiving, like you said. Bowtech makes badass bows. I shot the Realm like crazy. Loved it. Bowtech, I will say, one thing that I really like about that company, and like you said, there are a lot of good bows out there. I shoot 5 or 6 a year. I like Matthews. I like Hoyt. I like, it's hard to find a bad bow these days.
Well said.
It just is. I will say that Bowtech continually impresses me with technology that they come out with that's actually might enhance the experience, because sometimes stuff comes out and the bow companies want to talk a big game about it, but it really doesn't factor into the experience the way they make it. It's marketing speak, and it's cool stuff sometimes, but Bowtech, those engineers they're figuring out stuff that's pretty freaking cool, and they're trying things that tend to make the shooting experience better. And I love them for that. They're a choice. I'll make the choice for a Bowtech a lot. Let me put it that way. The other bow company that's impressed me a lot that I've started to gravitate to more at certain points is Prime. And the reason for that, again, so I don't care about speed. I don't shoot my bows through a chrono anymore unless I have to for some reason.
Right.
I really want a bow that is easy on my shoulders. Really solid back wall, dead in the hand, settles in the hand well, and seems to kind of shoot itself, because we just did a podcast with Randy Ulmer on Buck Fever, and he was talking about, you got to shoot enough to get to the point where when you go on autopilot, like you're gonna, when that big sucker walks in.
Right.
Like the less you have to think and the more you can function with fewer brain cells firing, the better you are. And those prime bows, they are built for accuracy through and through. So they're not the lightest bows out there. They're not blowing you away with like catchy technology. But if you look at like the parallel cam technology and the way they're designed, so there's so much balance throughout the entire cable and limb system and everything that there's just very, very little torsion when you're drawing. I've just as an example, I've had, I don't know how long they've been out, probably 7-8 years now, maybe 10 now, I'm not sure. But 2 different times I've set up a prime bow, taken it to my little backyard range here, and the first 2 shots I've shot have been a Robin Hood. And it's like, I've never, yeah. And I mean, that's just,
that's awesome.
That's a testament to that bow, not me. I am not like a killer shot. I'm just an okay archer.
Well, I hear you, but you're a pretty good shot. But there's, those Robin Hoods I still think are pretty cool. You get that on the internet a lot, like, oh, it's an expensive. I still think they're cool. I'll take them. Anytime they have the 30 years, I'm like, that's cool. You still enjoy seeing it. So that's impressive.
It's, it's little things. And if you dig into it, the thing that I think they've had a problem with is just the message is hard to get out. Like we're trying to build the most accurate bows possible that actually like sort of negate some of the form flaws we might impart when we're shooting in the, it's different on the range, but in the field, there's little things you'll do that you won't do on the range.
True.
And
so true.
They're just addressing that. So, I mean, that's a good choice, but that stated, in the last couple of years, I have killed a ton of stuff with Matthews, a bunch of stuff with Hoyt, Bear. At certain points, I've shot them and done really well with them. So there's good ones out there, but I always say like, buy to your specific need. So if you're a whitetail hunter, forget speed. Don't look at speed. Right. Go down to the pro shop, draw a bunch of bows that are set to your draw length. So if it's your draw length, for me, it's 29 inches. And not 80 pounds, try 70 or 60.
Right,
or if your peak, if you haven't been shooting a lot and your peak is 70, maybe try like a 62 pounder, like spend some time with them, and find what works for you.
Absolutely. I think, you brought up Randy Ulmer a few minutes ago. I mean, he's one of my heroes in the industry. I mean, one of the most intelligent guys out there. And when he speaks or he talks or he writes an article, I listen. I mean, I absorb everything he has to say, and he hit the nail on the head. Like you said, when you're in the field and you practice, you're going to hit your anchor and you're going to squeeze the release and you're going to keep your head down and you're not going to peek. Well, I guarantee you're going to punch the trigger. You're going to peek and you're going to, all those things that make arrows go low and off. And every little bit you have to make that less of an issue will support that. I mean, I've shot 6-inch bracelet and you shoot them well, but then what drives me crazy and what always sometimes gets me away from a certain model is flyers. Like, I yoke tune a lot and I bear shaft tune and I try to get them just right. But if my form is perfect or I'm just shooting and I see a flyer, then I lose confidence. So these bows, whether it's the Realm or some other ones, I've shot the HTR from Matthews years ago, a slow bow, but forgiving. Like if you you punch the trigger and we all know what we're talking about, you're on that 30th shot of the night and you're getting tired and sloppy and you punch it and you realize you missed by 4 inches instead of a foot. I mean, those things matter. So that's how I kind of pick my equipment, is what's going to allow me to have the least amount of mistake when I'm at my worst.
Yep.
And so because I'm at my worst when I've got a monster, whitetail moving in on me and I've been sitting there for 3 hours. Yep. And that's how all my equipment I base on the least amount of failure, the easiest to fix, and the most margin of error. And like I said, I chased speed. I shot the head, but I went from Matthews to Hoyt back to Matthews, Hoyt, and I love them all. But right now, for my physical capabilities and where I'm at in life, it's a sweet bow. I mean, the Realm. But as you said, there's some awesome models out there, and there's not one right answer. There's not one right answer.
What you said there is interesting. Before we move on, I want to get into this just a little bit, just to drive this point right into death. So think about, when you're shooting in the field and you're talking about when you're at your worst, because that's when you are at your worst. You're going to make your worst shot all year when that buck walks in. And I am fascinated by when a deer comes in and I aim and I think I'm aiming at a certain spot and I shoot, everything goes right. He runs off, tips over, everything doesn't go right, whatever. Always looking at what happened, the necropsy, seeing where my point of impact was versus where I believe I was aiming, because you can never really know. And seeing, I always think about it, if you put a block target in my yard at 20 yards, and I missed the bullseye by 5 inches, I'd be like, whoa, what's going on?
Exactly.
But if you put a buck out there and I'm aiming at him and I hit him 5 inches back, like clearly, and that's 100% possible. Clearly something's going on there that's not happening in the yard. Like,
right.
Acknowledge that.
It's so true. Everything from last year, I was fortunate to take one of the bigger whitetails I've taken. And I remember vividly when I told my friends that night, they like, where'd you hit him? I'm like, oh my gosh, I hit him too far back. And they're like, how far back? And I'm like, just too far back. And I knew, I mean, your eyes are focused on that shot, and there was no excuse. There was no, we were able to find him and harvest him the next day. But I remember vividly, my buddies were like, well, that's not too bad. But I remember vividly taking my thumb and pinky finger and measuring the distance between where I thought I was aiming. And he was so long because he was larger that it wasn't as far back as I thought. But from where I was aiming, it was. So if he wasn't as big of a whitetail, it's going to be even further back. So, I always tell people when you're on the range, you just have to have the most forgiveness possible at all times. And I think, like I say, a lot of the stuff's a cliche. You hear it written over and over again, and people are like, oh, we're all spouting off the same stuff about big brace heights and low poundage. And we still got that ego, right? In between the ears, like we got to blow through those deer and we've got to do this. But I'll never go back to shooting less forgiving equipment for speed or power, because, I mean, if you hit an animal in the brisket at, as fast, 350 feet per second, you're still going to have way less likelihood of finding that animal than, 150 feet per second in the breadbasket. So, but once again, I chase that same game. I mean, we all do, but hopefully this conversation leads some to not be so focused on those things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like we've sort of moved out of the speed craze. Back when PSE came out with the X-Force, that was it. And everybody was going for it, and God, did it suck. And now I feel like we're getting out of that. And, the takeaway from this is find a bow you enjoy shooting that fits you well, that's very comfortable. You don't have to struggle in any way, shape, or form, and that can put arrows where you want to put them. Like,
that's cool.
Shoot them 5 inches, 4 inches behind the shoulder and just kill them all day long. Let's talk arrows, buddy. What are you shooting?
That was Victory V-Force right now. Is my favorite arrow. And shot full metal jackets for a long time. I shot the Carbon Express line. I love the boning double lock nocks. I've loved those nocks. I know we're kind of backwards a little bit, but the arrows kind of came to the forefront for me because I love the nocks so much. I had some bad experience with knock pinch and, reading a lot of things from Ulmer and Dudley and those guys through the years. And it allowed me once again to have the most margin of error on knock pinch. And those arrows came with those nocks. And once again, not married to any product. And I said, well, I'll shoot them. How forgiving? I'm not forgiving. How durable are they? Are the inserts going to come out? Are they going to crack on me? And I have been very impressed with those arrow lines. They're not the flashiest arrows. They don't have the highest marketing and things like that. But I started shooting those 2 years ago and have been nothing but impressed. But at the same time, I haven't had a lot of issues. I shot gold tip for a long time, the pros. I really like those. The XT hunters, love those. But once again, the knock, I didn't enjoy the knocks as much. And I could not, I would go so far sometimes to get cellophane or saran wrap and put my knocks in the gold tips to keep them, tighter so I could shoot the knock I wanted. And finally, I found an arrow. Finally, I got tired of doing that. So the Victory V-Force, I've really liked that arrow. They've got some neat options to put the inserts in with a little more weight up front. And so, but most products do now. So, but that one's been kind to me. I've enjoyed that arrow and had no problems with it.
The arrow topic is interesting. The arrow category, because what you bring up is a good point. The knocks matter to you. Like that matters to you. That's a little component to this overall thing. So we focus on arrows a lot. We focus on spine. We focus on weight. We focus on price a lot. Like a lot of people, they think, you can go out and spend $300 for a dozen arrows now, or you can spend, $55 for a half dozen. You probably spend $55 for a whole dozen if you look hard enough.
Right.
But what you find is there's a sweet spot there. Today it's probably $150 a dozen, $200 a dozen, honestly, to get those components you want. And you're going to get straightness, plus or minus whatever, .001, .003 tops maybe, or at the worst end for straightness. You're going to have tight tolerances for weight, within plus or minus half a grain probably in each batch. So pay attention to that stuff, because the arrow one, I think is you look at them and arrows look the same. You're talking about an experience shooting them where you're like, these don't work as well. I like this knock.
Right.
I like this component. That's
right.
So important. And so even though they look the same, and where I'm going with this is, you're probably going to have to pay up, I think. Like there's ways to save your money. Buy fewer jars of dough pea, like buy save some money somewhere else, eat some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, buy good arrows. And I've shot Victory. I shot Victory, a few years ago. They were the VAP TKOs or the VAPs. I can't remember, but I killed the crap out of the animals with them, and I loved them. Their performance, they shot well. And I do remember liking the nocks a lot. In the last few years, I've messed around. I've shot the Full Metal Jackets. I shot the Easton Injections, Carbon Express. I've shot Gold Tip lately. And one way that I like to test arrows is, when you buy a dozen, you expect a flyer, right? Like probably one. Right. My general rule is if I'm matching broadheads to arrows and I'm getting ready for the season, if I have a fresh dozen arrows, whether I've practiced with them or not, I spin them, everything, I shoot them, I'll have at least one in the dozen that I can't get him right. He's going to be outside the group, and he just, I mark him up and he's gone. I've taken Gold Tip the last 2 years with those 4-fletched arrows. So I've got the Valkyries this year. Last year, I think it was the Kinetic Chaos, maybe. I can't remember, but they're 4-fletch. And both times I've taken a dozen out and gotten ready for the season, I haven't had a single flyer. And that impresses me.
That's impressive.
So, and where I'm going with that is a lot of people don't broadhead tune and broadhead match the way like a guy like you might. And, I get pretty anal about that stuff.
I'm with you. I'm like that. I number my arrows like 1, 2, 3 with silver Sharpies.
Yep.
And I'll notice the flyer, and then before you know it, you hate number 5.
Yep.
Or you hate number 9.
Yep.
And by the time the season's rolling, and I'll shoot those. So, a lot of guys, will use that, they'll buy a dozen arrows, they'll keep them for the season, they'll only hunt with them. But boy, I tell you what, I shoot my arrows 3D. Right about now, I'm actually going to get some out here and shoot them all the way through October, so I agree with you. I think we should be a little more particular of those things. But again, there's certain things that affect other people that might not, another guy. So, but I'm like you, I'm real picky about the knock fit and the flight with broadheads and individual shafts. So,
yeah, well, and you're making a good point there. And before we move on, I just want to say, like, the reason that matters so much is if you're the guy who doesn't shoot broadheads, so you just screw on broadheads, cross your fingers because you've been shooting well with field points. I don't care if you're shooting mechanicals. I don't care if you're shooting fixed blades. You don't know how that flies, that combination. And even if you shoot fixed blades with this arrow and you say, oh, this arrow and this fixed blade's flying good, I can just screw in broadheads to the rest of them and fill my quiver up. I guarantee you're probably not having 3, 4, 5 arrows in there with broadheads on that are all flying the same way. And I think it's just our responsibility to at least know if you're knocking that arrow and you're going to shoot at an animal, you should know that arrow and that broadhead flies really well.
Absolutely. I mean, as well as I do, sometimes you might get one opportunity all year. I mean, one opportunity at that animal it's one of those sports that, you put so much effort into it and you get that one opportunity. And for me, when the time of seasons go, whether it's clothing or my rest or my knocks, I want to know that I've exhausted every option. And if things go south, that I did everything I could to prevent that from happening. Mm-hmm. And, we all had a little lazier, preps when you're busy or, your kids are born and things like that where you don't practice as hard. But I keep coming back to the things that I've always done, matching the broadheads and the arrows and numbering them. And whether that matters or not in the long run, it gives me more confidence, just like a 7-inch brace height does, just like a quieter coat. And so that when that crunch time comes, you're not thinking about those other things and your success is a little more likely. So keeping it strong between the ears, I think, helps. And like you, if you're more confident with that arrow combo that you've designated to be your best flyer,
yep,
I think you're more accurate because you're more confident.
Without question, confidence is huge.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
I try to look at it from this perspective as a whitetail hunter. You know, it gets different when you're out crawling after mule deer, antelope, or something. But my whitetail shots, most of our whitetail shots are dumb close. I mean, you should be able to kill a deer at 20 yards all day long. You should just be able to about kill him with a spear. And yet we go out with this bow and arrow combination we've been shooting all summer or for 3 years or 5 years, and we miss them. And I'm like, we all know why, mostly. Like, it's in our head, right? But if it's it should, the only excuse you should have for missing that deer is because you fell apart in your head.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't be because your arrow is flying wonky and off that much at 20 yards or your broadheads or whatever. It should be just because you fell apart and you screwed up.
Right. Absolutely. You know, it's funny. I don't know about you, but sometimes you'll stop an animal, you know, before they're walking through your lane too quick, and you'll kind of burp at them or grunt at them. If you do that and you're listening, try this sometime next time you're shooting. Actually do that on the practice range, and you'll feel your anxiety rise. You will feel everything tense up in your bow arm and your trigger finger because you're anticipating something to get rid of this anxiety you're feeling. And that's why I think we all get nervous. Whether, you know, we want to just punch that trigger and be done with the experience because it's so nerve-wracking and you're going to release all that. But it's amazing. So I do that frequently. I've tried to break myself about whitetails ever since I was 14 when they would come by and I couldn't stop them. You know, I was never good at leading them, and I'm probably not sure you should be, but I've always stopped them.
Yep.
And so when I start practicing now into August and September, my last 2 arrows of the night, I'll actually like grunt, you know, verbally. And it's amazing how your mind takes you to that moment, because that might be the only grunt you ever take with a shot. So I've found those little tiny things you do to decrease the chance you'll make a mistake help me. But everybody's got their, whether you stand up to shoot or sit down to shoot, all those things. If you don't practice those specific things, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. So
that's a good tip. I have never thought about doing that.
It's weird. You do it, you're like, oh my gosh, he's going to just target panic on me. But it's amazing. So, you know, if obviously you don't do it, it's no big deal. But it's amazing how that sound really makes you completely change your mindset in your practice session, and it puts you in that oak tree, you know, middle of the rut, and that one shot you might get in that one lane that you hope you walk through. So that's where it's helped me.
That's, you know, that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because now that I think about it, I'm like, when you murp at that deer and he stops and looks up, or you know, he freezes, that's like turning over the you know, like the stopwatch, like starting the stopwatch and being like, okay, you've got 5 seconds, dude. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
You better make this happen.
You know, or they're moving and you're like, do I take the shot now at 28? No, he's coming closer. Now he's at 21. Okay, at 15, I'm going to do it. So all those things, you know, even sports psychologists talk about deliberate practice, just shooting versus putting yourself in situations. And once again, it goes back to the cliche of, oh, you know, everybody talks about that psychology of it. But I've had so many painful experiences where you botch that effort and you go back, you know, what could I have done different? And you realize when you did shoot, it was nothing like you practiced.
Yep.
Your pin was looking like a conductor's bet, you know, moving all around, and you're breathing heavy and you're like, and then boom, it's over. And then you're like, oh, you know, I missed or I made a bad shot. And so if you try to mimic that psychological reaction and bring out the physical reaction, it's amazing how much more accurate you'll become. I've done that for probably 5 to 7 years now. It's worked wonders for me, but yeah, that works for me. Maybe not for you, but definitely helps me.
I guarantee you I'm going to try. I'm going to try it tonight probably. Let's move on. What about broadheads?
You know, so that's a great topic. If you saw my little workshop down here, I've got so many different broadheads. I've shot single bevel. 15, I was shooting that HTR with single bevel broadheads and just always trying different things. And my first whitetail I ever took was with a rocket broadhead. Mm-hmm. And I thought back maybe a year or two ago thinking I've never had a bad experience with a rocket broadhead. And so now this doesn't have to be, mechanicals have been kind to me, but when I was hunting some bigger animals like bison or moose, I shot fixed blades, and elk I shot fixed blades. And I love shooting fixed blades, but I have the most confidence in mechanicals. Mm-hmm. And I think, but I'm also a crazy tuner. So I've also got a good argument when I talk to people like, oh, you know, you don't shoot fixed. I'm like, no. I bear shaft tune and I shoot fixed blades. In fact, I'll find the biggest, nastiest, like a Zwickey, and I'll throw it on my arrows just to see what kind of tune I've got, to see if I've got that good flight.
Yep.
But when it comes down to the season, I have a lot of confidence in rocket broadheads from the hammerhead. I'm shooting the steelhead now. I have really good luck with that. It's amazing because it's only a 1.25 inch cut.
Yep.
But, I'm always getting a double pass through, and it's always been striking to me how good a blood trail can be if you make a good shot, versus how bad it can be if you don't. And I've never had a bad experience with the Rage either, and I've taken a few with those, and I know they're very popular. Mm-hmm. But I'd say Rocket and Rage are the two, and Slick Trick I've had excellent success with. But right now I'm leaning more towards the Rockets. But I start trying to get my elk points cashed in the years to come. I'll probably go back to a fixed, like a Slick Trick. So, but once again, like bows, there's a host of good ones.